Aliyu's eyes followed her every movement. He couldn't help it. Each time she walked by, it felt like time stood still. Hajara, his father's new wife, was the most beautiful woman Aliyu had ever seen. Her skin was smooth like chocolate, and her smile lit up the room. But what captivated him most was her curvy figure. It wasn't long before he realized his admiration was turning into something much deeper, something dangerous. One evening, as they all sat down for dinner, Aliyu couldn't take his eyes off Hajara. She served his father, who smiled lovingly at her, and then turned to Aliyu with the same kindness. But to Aliyu, it was different. The way she spoke, the way she moved, it made his heart race. He wished he was the one she looked at with those soft, caring eyes. As the days passed, Aliyu's feelings grew stronger, and his mind became clouded with thoughts of Hajara. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All he could think about was how to have her for himself. But there was one thing standing in his way: his father, Malam Ibrahim. Malam Ibrahim was a good man, well respected in the community. But Aliyu began to see him as an obstacle, something to be removed. His thoughts twisted, turning into a dark plan. What if his father were out of the picture? What if Hajara was free to be with someone else, someone like him? Aliyu's heart pounded as the idea took root. One evening, as he sat alone in his room, the shadows playing tricks on the walls, he made up his mind. He would accuse his father of something so terrible that the whole city would turn against him. Then, maybe then, Hajara would be his. The next day, Aliyu went to the city square where people gathered. His voice trembled, but he forced the words out. My father, he has been stealing from the poor, from the mosque's donations. The lie tasted bitter on his tongue, but he swallowed it down. I've seen it with my own eyes, he continued, his voice gaining strength. He hides the money in the house, pretending to be a good man, but he is nothing but a thief. The crowd gasped. Malam Ibrahim. A thief. The whisper spread like wildfire. People looked at Aliyu, shocked, but his face was set, determined. Hajara, who had been passing by, stopped in her tracks. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her heart sank as she listened, her eyes searching Aliyu's face for any sign that it was a mistake, a cruel joke. But there was none. As the accusation spread, the city turned against Malam Ibrahim. The once respected man now faced the shame and anger of the people. Hajara, torn between her loyalty to her husband and the growing doubt in her heart, didn't know what to do. Aliyu watched it all unfold, a twisted satisfaction curling in his chest. But as he saw the pain in his father's eyes, the tears on Hajara's face, a small voice in his head whispered, "What have you done?" That night, after Malam Ibrahim had been cast out by the villagers, Aliyu's heart raced as he approached Hajara's room. He knew what he was about to do was wrong, but the desire had taken over his mind completely. His father was gone, banished by the very people who once respected him, all because of Aliyu's lies. Now, he had a chance to be with Hajara, the woman he had longed for. He knocked softly on her door. Hajara, he called, trying to sound calm, though his voice trembled slightly. Inside, Hajara was sitting on her bed, her eyes swollen from crying. She hadn't eaten all day, the pain of losing her husband weighing heavily on her heart. When she heard Aliyu's voice, she quickly wiped her tears and got up to open the door. "Aliyu, what is it?" she asked, her voice weak. Aliyu stepped inside, his eyes quickly scanning the room before he closed the door behind him. "I just wanted to check on you," he said, his voice filled with concern. "I know this has been hard on you, on all of us." Hajara nodded, not meeting his eyes. "It's so difficult, Aliyu. I don't know how to go on without him." Aliyu moved closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "You're not alone, Hajara," he said softly. "I'm here for you, always." Hajara looked up at him, her eyes filled with sadness. But your father, how could he do such a thing? Aliyu swallowed hard, pushing down the guilt that was threatening to choke him. People can be deceiving, Hajara. Even those we trust the most. He reached out and gently took her hand. But I promise, I never deceive you. I'll always be here for you. Hajara's hand trembled in his, and she pulled it away slowly, unsure of how to feel. She was grateful for Aliyu's support, but something about the way he was looking at her made her uneasy. Yet, she was too lost in her grief to think clearly. "Thank you, Aliyu," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I think I need to rest now." Aliyu nodded, stepping back. "Of course, Hajara. I'll leave you to rest." He paused at the door, turning back to look at her. "If you need anything at all, I'm just down the hall." Hajara managed a small smile. "Thank you." But as Aliyu left her room and walked back to his own, his mind was already planning his next move. He would visit her again the next night, and the night after that, until she trusted him completely, until she saw him as more than just her stepson. The next night, Aliyu returned to Hajara's room, knocking softly as before. This time, she hesitated before opening the door. "Aliyu, it's late, what is it?" she asked, her voice filled with exhaustion. "I couldn't sleep," Aliyu said, his voice smooth and comforting. "I was thinking about you, wondering if you were okay." Hajara sighed, stepping aside to let him in. "It's hard, Aliyu. I feel so lost without him." Aliyu moved closer, his eyes locking onto hers. "You don't have to be lost, Hajara. I'm here for you. Let me take care of you." Hajara's heart skipped a beat at his words, and for a moment, she felt a strange comfort in his presence. But before she could respond, Aliyu gently took her hand and led her to the bed, sitting beside her. "You need someone to hold you, to make you feel safe," Aliyu whispered, his hand brushing against her cheek. Hajara shivered at his touch, confusion and grief swirling in her mind. "Aliyu, he hushed her softly, his face close to hers. "Let me take care of you, Hajara. You deserve to be happy." But as Aliyu leaned in closer, his heart pounding with anticipation, Hajara pulled back suddenly, her eyes wide with fear and realization. "No, Aliyu," she said, her voice trembling. "This isn't right. You're his son, this isn't right." Aliyu's face hardened, but he quickly masked it with a concerned expression. "I'm only trying to help you, Hajara. We both need each other now." But Hajara stood up, her heart racing. "I need to be alone, Aliyu. Please, go." Aliyu's jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly, standing up and walking towards the door. "All right, Hajara," he said quietly. "But remember, I'm here whenever you need me." As the door closed behind him, Hajara sat back down on the bed, her heart heavy with confusion and fear. Something wasn't right, and deep down, she knew it. Aliyu, on the other hand, walked back to his room, his mind racing with thoughts of how to get what he wanted. He wouldn't give up, not now. Not when he was so close. What will happen next? Will Hajara continue to resist Aliyu's advances, or will his deception finally break her down? And what consequences will Aliyu face for his actions? For the next few nights, Aliyu returned to Hajara's room, each time with the same gentle words and soft reassurances. At first, Hajara continued to resist, her mind battling with the feelings of guilt and confusion. But every time he left, she found herself feeling more alone, more vulnerable. Aliyu's persistence was wearing her down. Each night, he would come to her room, offering comfort when she felt most lost, speaking softly to her about how they both needed each other. He reminded her constantly of how much she had lost, how lonely she was without Malam Ibrahim. And slowly, Hajara began to believe him. One evening, as the city lights flickered outside, Aliyu knocked on her door again. This time, when Hajara opened the door, she didn't hesitate as much. She looked into Aliyu's eyes and saw the same kindness, the same concern that had been there every night. But now, it was different. The loneliness in her heart had grown too strong, and the comfort Aliyu offered was too tempting. "Aliyu," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I don't know what to do anymore. I feel so empty." Aliyu stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "You don't have to feel empty, Hajara. I'm here, remember? I'll always be here." He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a shiver down her spine. "Let me take care of you," he said, his voice soft and persuasive. This time, Hajara didn't pull away. She looked down at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his touch, and the walls she had built around herself began to crumble. The grief, the loneliness, the confusion, they all seemed to fade as she allowed herself to lean into the comfort Aliyu was offering. Aliyu sensed her weakening resolve, and he moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You don't have to be alone, Hajara. We can be there for each other." Hajara closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "But it's wrong, Aliyu," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm your father's wife." Aliyu gently wiped her tears away, his touch tender. "Hajara, what we had is gone. We need to move on, to find happiness where we can. I can make you happy." Hajara opened her eyes, looking at him with a mixture of pain and longing. The part of her that knew this was wrong was growing weaker by the second, and the part of her that craved comfort, that craved love, was taking over. "Aliyu," she started, but before she could say more, Aliyu leaned in and pressed his lips to hers. For a moment, Hajara froze, her mind screaming that this was wrong. But the feel of his lips, the warmth of his touch, silenced those thoughts. She kissed him back, her hands trembling as she wrapped them around his neck. That night, Aliyu got what he had wanted. Hajara, broken down by his persistent deception, finally gave in to him. And as the nights passed, it became a routine. Every night, Aliyu would come to her room, and every night, Hajara would let him in, letting him take the place of the man she had lost. But with each passing night, the weight of their actions grew heavier on Hajara's heart. She knew deep down that what they were doing was wrong, that she was betraying Malam Ibrahim in the worst way possible. But each time Aliyu held her, each time he whispered sweet words into her ear, the guilt would fade, replaced by the need for comfort and connection. As for Aliyu, he felt no such guilt. His heart was filled with a twisted satisfaction, knowing that he had finally taken what he had desired for so long. But in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that this could not last forever, that eventually, someone would find out, and the consequences would be severe. Yet, night after night, they continued, each moment filled with a mix of passion and despair. Hajara, lost in her grief, had allowed herself to be deceived, and Aliyu, consumed by his desire, had taken advantage of her vulnerability. But what will happen when the truth comes out? Will Hajara realize the extent of Aliyu's deception? Will Aliyu face the consequences of his actions? The story is far from over. Watch out for the next part of this story. Please do subscribe and turn on your notification bell icon so you will be notified when we post the next episode. Thanks so much for watching. See you in our next video.